Okay, good morning. It's Sunday, and you have homework due tomorrow at noon, so most of you will work tonight, tomorrow morning. I know lots of you have already got started, and of course, since I posted it on Thursday and it involves reading, hopefully you've already read your chosen piece. If you haven't done that, that's still the first step. You can't tune in and try to get the answers here. You still have to read and annotate on your own. This represents the discussion that we would have in class the day the reading assignment is due, where we could share some ideas and maybe you could get some more illumination from the ideas of your classmates if you didn't initially spot what we'll be talking about in the video, which is, okay, so what do I do with these pieces? How do I find a theme using the symbol that you guided me towards, Mr. Honor? Well, both of these pieces are about trauma. The Destructors by Graham Greene is about the trauma of war. It is about a very traumatic event. As you watch the video, which is fixed, thank you to the classmate who pointed that out, that it was blocked on the Bedford School District. Now you can watch it. It's not blocked because it's violent or anything like that. It's just funky Lurgio Bedford stuff. You can see Londoners picking over the wreckage of their hometown. In the other piece, A Temporary Matter by Jhumpa Lahiri, is about a very personal trauma, the loss of a baby. When you think about humans and trauma, what are the ways that we internalize this, but don't necessarily outwardly say that we're experiencing trauma? The same is true for any emotion. If you're having an emotional day, you don't walk into school and say, "Hey everyone, I'm super emotional today." You say, "Ugh, if I have to look at my math teacher today, I'm going to punch him in the face." You don't actually mean that. It's an expression of the feelings. You're not able to actually say, "This is because I had a bad breakfast," or because I had a fight with my dog the night before. Our behaviors are connected, but humans aren't always great at expressing in words how we feel. So both of these pieces are about people who are feeling things, but they are not able to put words to their feelings, and so it comes out in the narrative arc of these stories. The second thing that both papers ask you to do is to look at a particular symbol. In the Destructors, I said, you know what, look at the house. And in A Temporary Matter, I said, you know what, look at the blackout. So what you should do when you read, if you understand what I was saying in that first part about that both of these pieces are about humans experiencing something, but not necessarily able to talk about it. Take the house and track it. Take the blackout and track it. Actually write down a schedule. Write down the moments where the house makes changes. Write down the schedule of the blackouts in A Temporary Matter. And then right next to those things, track the ways that you are learning to understand the characters or the way the characters are maybe understanding themselves. And see if there's a link between the presentation of that object, that symbol, and what the humans in the pieces are going through, but not necessarily able to express clearly. Okay, now let's do some specifics. Let's start with A Temporary Matter by Jhumpa Lahiri. I had you watch a video about relationships and how relationships rely on communication. In what ways are Shukumar and Shobha no longer experiencing the positive relationship behaviors that is outlined in that TED Talk. Again, it's not things that they are going to outright say. It's going to be expressed in the way that Lahiri has them behave. The trick is that the obvious summary of the piece is that during the blackouts, Shobha and Shukumar get closer. But that is a ruse. Don't get tricked by saying, oh, that's what this piece is about, because then the ending doesn't make any sense to you. And if there's people who haven't read out there, I do have to keep you still a little in the dark. But the ending does make sense. The ending makes sense if you go back and know how the piece ends and read it again and watch Shobha, in particular, a lot closer. You know what? Watch Shukumar closer, in particular. Is Shukumar good at knowing how his wife feels for real? Is Shobha good at expressing herself for real? When we talk about a blackout, we talk about light. If you have electricity, you have light. If the light is out, you don't. When you have light, you can see. When you don't have light, you're blind. What is Shukumar blind to? What can't he see? We can be blind, as in our eyes actually covered, but how can we cover up the eyes of our heart? What is he no longer able to see about his wife? Consider the nights of the blackout, where the couple is closer together. Is that real closeness? What is the definition of real closeness? Okay, let's move over to The Destructors by Graham Greene. All right, important. This is not a gang like 1980s drug crimes fiction. This is not a gang like 1920s mobster fiction. It's just a group of kids. Oldest junior high, youngest elementary school. So, are they stealing trolley rides? Are they criminals? I mean, if you think a kid stealing a candy bar from a gas station is a criminal, then yeah, they're hard criminals. But other than that, they're not hard criminals. So when you know them to be called the Wormsley Common Gang, just think of your own neighborhoods and when you were on BMX bikes on those dirt roads and you called yourselves the Clown Crew or whatever, and you had a name for you and your friends. Like, that's what these are. It's a group of friends who live in the same neighborhood. So don't get caught up by them wanting to do something bad because they're criminals. On the flip side, don't take away from the extremeness of their ultimate choice to destroy an old man's house. They do destroy an old man's house. But that should actually help you. If they're just kids, what makes it possible for just kids to look at destroying a house as an act of creativity, an act of childhood? They're kids. How could war make it possible for kids to destroy a house and feel like that is the right thing to do? Think about Old Misery and what the kids think of him, and then read it again. And what do you think of him? Can you separate the way the kids describe him? And if you look at him as just an older guy that lives in the neighborhood, when he talks to the children, how does he actually feel about the children? How do the children actually feel about him? Even when they are destroying his house, do they want him to be hurt? Do they hate him? Do they hate the person, or do they hate the house? Why would they hate the last standing house in their neighborhood? What does old Misery gain when his house is removed? Is his house actually trapping him from seeing his neighborhood the way the kids see their neighborhood? Another important thing to understand about British culture compared to American culture. This is not as much the case now. 80 years have passed since the 40s. But at the turn of the 18th and 19th century, the United Kingdom was still very much a class-based culture. You had the nobility, and you had like the working class, and those were very separate things based on a tradition of monarchy. Nobles, lords and ladies, and then the commoners that worked for them. You can see that sort of behavior if your parents know what Downton Abbey is, or going even older, Upstairs, Downstairs, or lots of British period pieces from that turn of the century. You will have these big fancy houses with a cast of characters, and then there's the family that's upper class, and then there's a bunch of servants that work for them. And both of them have very interesting stories, and they're treated like people, but they're two very separate groups of people. One of the aspects of World War I and World War II, especially World War I, is it was in Europe the tradition for the nobility to go to war. And so the nobility actually lost a lot of their lords and ladies to be. Well, lords, but without lords, you can't have ladies back then. So while this is still very much true that there is class in this piece, the wars eroded that in British culture, especially a place like London, the urban areas, because the war laid everybody low. Or, in the case of World War I, it actually reduced the numbers of young men in the nobility to such an extreme that the working class was able to start making inroads in filling the positions that needed to be filled. And when I talk about positions, I talk about work. And so that's why it is really important to look at Trevor, right? He's called T for a reason, or he calls himself T, and they learn to call him T. But at one point they say, Trevor. His name is Trevor. Whereas the gang is Mike and Blackie. Trevor. Why has Trevor come down in the world? What were his parents before the war? How has war equalized him? Why would Trevor want that for old Misery? If these are just kids who have experienced war, they're not actually criminals. Why would the driver, all right, driver, end of the piece, hey, Matt, where you need to go? Lower class. You gotta admit, mister, it's pretty funny. Right? How is he able to see the humor in it? Okay. I'm not going to give you, like, the house means this, the blackout means this. If you have other ideas, if the blackout is not the symbol you want to use, if you want to talk about Shukumar's cooking, if the house is not what you want to use, if you want to talk about Trevor's name, Right? If you want a different literary device in your thesis that you focus on, that's game, right? If you have an idea, those both are just sort of push and say, like, I know you're searching for an idea, so why don't you look at this symbol, because it's a symbol you can track. And both times, how are these symbols being used to show what the humans are feeling when the humans can't show that themselves? Right? Especially in a couple that's breaking apart, especially in kids. Why is it so hard for them to say what they're actually feeling? We have the job to say, like, I know how those human beings are feeling in that situation. And here is how those authors showed us those feelings. Here's how the authors, make sure you use the author's name. Graham Greene uses the house too. Good morning, Wesley. Jhumpa Lahiri uses the blackout too.
Hi.
They're going to love you.
Hi.
Do what? And that's how you write your thesis. All right. Good luck. Look forward to reading your outlines tomorrow.